Thank you, Camila. Thank you for joining us on our third strategic debate of 2025. It's always a great pleasure to welcome you to these debates. Today's event is organized in collaboration with the UNESCO SDG 4 Global Education Cooperation Mechanism, the Learning Equity Initiative, the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, and our colleagues from the UNESCO Bangkok office. This afternoon discussions will address a key topic of primary concern for all education systems worldwide: how to reduce the teacher gap and plan for equitable teaching. We know that teachers play a critical role in the learning process and in reducing inequalities in learning inequalities. Yet, according to UNESCO, an estimated of 44 million teachers are still required to reach the goal of university, primary, and secondary education by 2030, including 15 million in sub-Saharan Africa alone. Despite this need, education authorities continue to struggle with attracting and keeping qualified teachers. However, as we will discuss today, filling the teacher gap and ensuring that all children have access to quality teaching requires more than just recruiting and retaining more teachers. To successfully fulfill their mission, teachers need to have the necessary knowledge, skills, and support to meet the needs of learners in their specific context. During this debate, we will look at how this issue is being addressed in different regions of the world through policies, tools, and other innovative approaches. More specifically, we will review techniques and policies currently piloted in different contexts to reduce the teacher gap, improve teacher professional development, and plan for more equitable teaching, building on recent research on the topic. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers for what promises to be a thought-provoking debate. In the first place, Barbara Tournier, our colleague from IIP, program specialist coordinating our research and technical cooperation projects on teacher issues and the broader education workforce. She also directs the Institute's work on middle-tier capacities analysis, exploring how the staff and structures at this level can be leveraged to better support schools and frontline practitioners. In second place, we will have Helen Iniega, Senior Resource Person at the Association for the Development of Education in Africa. She specializes in the design of instructional materials and teacher professional development programs and in foundational learning, literacy, numeracy, and social-emotional learning assessments. We will have also from Latin America, Gregory Elacqua, who is principal economist in the education division of the Inter-American Development Bank. His research and technical policy work include the economics of education, centralized student and teacher assignment, teacher policies, school choice, school accountability, and the political economy of the educational policies and systems. Last but not least, we will also hear from two guests from the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you both for also joining us today. We will have Dir Jingran, founder and executive director of the Language and Learning Foundation, a major Indian non-profit organization focused on improving students' foundational learning at scales, which has improved the classroom context and practices of 250,000 teachers and educators across 10 Indian states. We will also have today with us Cryos Patraward, who is managing director of the language and of the Equitable Education Fund, an independently managed public fund for equitable education and human development in Thailand. Thank you all for sharing your experience with us today. Over to you, Muriel.
Good afternoon to all of you. So for our session today, we are going to organize ourselves as follows. We are going to give 7 minutes to each of the speakers for the presentation that will be followed by a short round table. And then I will give you the floor to you, our online participants. So please do not hesitate to post your questions in the chat room during the presentation for our Q&A session, which will last around 25 minutes at the end of this session. So without further ado, I will now hand it over to our first speaker, Barbara, to kick us off with the topic of secondary teacher management to reduce the teacher gap in Africa, referring to recent publications of IP. We are going to provide the link in the chat and that we invite you to download. So over to you, Barbara.
Many thanks, Muriel. I'm just going to wait for the slides to come up. Here they are. So I'm very happy to be here. I work at IIEP on education workforce issues, and I'm really looking forward to the exchanges that we'll have on this critical issue of teacher shortage. So I'm going to be specifically talking, well, a bit more on the secondary level, and drawing examples from sub-Saharan Africa. But many of the strategies that I'll be presenting here are also valuable at the primary level. So the intention is just to give you an overview, and then the other panelists, I think we'll go into a lot more detail on specific initiatives or tools that they have been using. Next slide, please. So the reason we're focusing more specifically on secondary education and on sub-Saharan Africa is because, as you know, the demand for secondary education is growing as completion rates have been improving. So more and more students are going into secondary education, which is a really good thing. Because secondary education is really important for political stability, human development, economic competitiveness, and equipping young people with essential skills beyond the primary level. And as Martin said, we know that, globally we need over 44 million teachers, 1/3 of those in sub-Saharan Africa, and especially at the secondary level. So it's 6 million at the primary and nearly 9 million at secondary level. But it's more difficult at that level because teachers are more qualified. So the teacher shortages are even more acute at that level, specifically in certain subjects like maths and science. And then similarly to the primary level, you've got difficulties in attracting and retaining teachers in remote areas and ensuring equitable distribution of staff, which impacts quality and equity. So IIP recently released a guidebook on secondary teacher management. It gives guidance on how to project teacher requirements, to diagnose supply, allocation, and utilization. And Chapter 5 looks into potential strategies to improve the supply, the allocation, and utilization of teachers. So this is what I'll be giving you an overview of. And before we launch into this, I really want to stress that improving teacher management and reducing the teacher gap requires systemic strategies that balance long-term goals with short-term needs, and that strategies must really carefully assess the costs, the risks, and the benefits, especially as many of those issues are interlinked, and that's really important. All the strategies have pros and cons. And then just to say that some promising strategies that, will cover aspects of supply allocation and utilization that are a bit cross-cutting and that we see more and more increasingly used are, strengthening the institutional capacity using data-driven tools such as automated tools for teacher allocation, and also decentralizing recruitment and training. And I think that you'll hear a lot more about from the other panelists. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk here a little bit about how you can improve your supply of secondary teachers. So basically, how can you get more teachers into your system? So there's a few options available to you that countries have used, such as relaxing entry requirements and shortening training programs. Or in cases where you don't have enough teacher training institutes, working in conjunction with the private sector or using distance-based courses. Another option is when you have a large pool of graduates and where there is high unemployment among those graduates, is to recruit directly from this pool of graduates with shortened training. So this is, for example, one of the strategies used by the Teach for All program, where they recruit high-level graduates and place them in remote schools for a specific time period. Another option is to hire contract or community teachers. That has been widely used in a number of different settings with very mixed evidence. It is a short-term solution, but it is the most effective in terms of cost saving. But again, you need to consider the trade-offs in terms of the quality of education and the impact it can have on the quality of education. On the contrary, some of the more long-term solutions are making the career more attractive or providing scholarships to students to go into teaching. So obviously, the ideal scenario is to have salaries that are comparable to professions with similar requirements. And we see worldwide that this is not the case. Often teachers are paid less than other similar occupations. So in some countries, they have gradually raised salaries, such as in Thailand. But obviously, this is very costly. So it depends on the finances available. But it is essential to get out of that vicious circle where it's not attractive to become a teacher, and then you don't get good teachers coming into, good candidates coming into teacher training. So related to that, you can also provide scholarships for secondary and tertiary graduates to go into teaching in priority subjects, and then ask them to serve in underserved areas. So I'll talk a little bit about the Funza Lusaka bursary that is in place in South Africa as an example. Next slide, please. So this is a government-funded bursary program that is designed to encourage young people to become teachers, and it especially targets rural schools and priority subjects where the shortages are more acute. And students who want to study education degrees can apply, and they will have their full costs of study covered. And in return, they are required to teach in public schools for the same number of years that they received the bursary. Next slide, please. So now if we look into teacher allocation, so again, there's a number of strategies that can be used, all with pros and cons, and we know how difficult it is to influence and to get teacher allocation right. So again, a number of countries have resorted to using financial incentives like higher salaries or allowances to go and teach in remote areas, as well as non-financial incentives such as professional development, housing, transport, or daycare for teachers who agree to work in rural or underserved areas. And you can also combine this with your career advancement. You can give additional points to teachers who are going into remote areas that allow them to go faster in their career progression. You can also require that newly qualified teachers serve in rural or hard-to-staff areas for a fixed term. Again, you need to look at the downside of this. You're sending new teachers often in very difficult places. You can consider rotating experienced teachers periodically to ensure a fair mix across schools. And then you can consider redeployment when you have a lot of oversupply in some schools and undersupply in others. But that again has to be very carefully planned for and is not typically favored by teachers. And so you might, you'll face challenges, teachers resisting relocation due to family or personal ties. Infrastructure is another obstacle. Teachers may be unwilling to move to areas without adequate housing, transport, or health services. And then political pressures can also distort deployment, with some schools receiving more teachers and others being left out. So these challenges are really important because they remind us that effective allocation policies must be supported by broader improvements in infrastructure, incentives, and governance. So really, it's more of a development issue, making sure that those teachers who are in remote areas benefit also from the same services. Next slide, please. So this is an example from Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has too few qualified teachers, especially in core subjects, and recruiting new teachers would be too expensive. So the policymakers, thought about this and designed two main approaches, each with several options to increase the number of qualified teachers in rural schools. Next slide, please. And what's really interesting with that example is that they carefully weighed the costs and the pros and cons of the different options. So you can see on your screen here the different options that they reviewed. They included redistribute teachers within a region from schools with surplus to schools in need, share underutilized core subject specialists, preference matching model to pair schools in need with most suitable teachers, provide direct incentives to those working in remote schools. Next slide, please. And then to support teachers already in rural areas, they looked at the costs of supporting unqualified teachers working in schools, supporting young women living in remote areas to gain teaching qualification and skills, improving learning through expert radio lessons, and improving learning using study camps. So you can see here, this was a paper that was prepared for the Teaching Service Commission to help them really identify the right mix of strategies and to see, what is affordable and really weighing in on that decision process. Next slide, please. And finally, improving teacher utilization. This is really important because when you've got really scarce resources, teacher management becomes all the most important because you really have to manage the resources that you have as best you can. So there's a number of options that can be looked at here to really improve the utilization of your teachers. So some countries have put in place multiple subject specialization. So that means that a teacher can teach biology and physics, for example, or he can teach arts and music. So they're able to cover their teaching load by teaching different subjects. And they can also do that for different levels. So they can be teaching at different grade levels within secondary schools. You can also look into, one thing to check for is to check whether teachers are allowed to work across several schools. So what you might find is sometimes teachers are not used to their full potential. They're not doing their full teaching hours because just there aren't enough pupils in the school, or there just are not enough classes within that school. So if you allow teachers to teach across several schools, then you don't need to hire as many, because then they will be able to teach their full workload. You can also look into school consolidation, so maybe merging some some schools with others if you've got too few schools, and also carefully calculating also the ideal size of a school compared to the curriculum and the number of teaching hours of teachers, to make sure that you're optimizing the teacher time. Other options can include increasing the teachers' working hours in cases where teachers are not teaching that many hours in terms of their statutory workload, and that has to be negotiated with them. Countries have also increased the pupil-teacher ratio, so increasing the class size. So that's what they did in Korea. They had very large class sizes with very experienced teachers.
Need to conclude.
You can, yeah, okay. Delegate non-teaching tasks. You can ask teachers to do overtime, especially in subjects where there is a shortage. And then use ICT to expand reach. And then we have an example from the Zambia, which is the next slide. In Zambia, teacher absenteeism, which is also a big problem and needs to be reduced, which is part of improving teacher utilization. So they appointed cluster leads who were there to support teachers, but also to monitor their attendance, and those who were not attending would lose, access to professional development opportunities. So that created extra accountability. And that's it from me. If I can just have the last slide. Yes. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions and to download the publications. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. Thanks a lot with this last example. As you understood, that was on Gambia. So after hearing on those different options related to teacher allocations and utilization in the context of Africa, we are going to stay with the same region with Hélène from the ADEA, who is also going to bring us through different examples on how to reduce the teacher gap and how to improve teacher retention in underserved area in Africa, building on recent evidence collected by the ADEA in the domain. So over to you, Hélène.
All right. Thank you, Muriel. Good day, everyone. Really happy to be here today to share my insights about improving the conditions under which teachers serve in disadvantaged settings. I am coming representing Association for Development of Education in Africa, ADEA, but I'm also a professor at the University of Nairobi. Thank you for having me. One of the issues, and I'm glad that Barbara has already set the pace for us, teachers in many African, rural, and disadvantaged areas have many challenges. One of which I would like to point out is professional isolation, when they are away from the city centers, they are on their own, but also they may receive fragmented, continuous teacher professional development. They may also lack a context-specific guidance that they need to be able to teach effectively, over and above infrastructural deficits in those areas. And these factors definitely reduce teacher motivation and retention. And one of the examples I saw from Kenya is that teacher attrition rate is at 10%. Especially when those areas are not conducive for teaching. So some of the context-driven strategies that have been used include linking teacher training directly to rural school realities, for example, including a curriculum adaptation. And this has really made training relevant and retention more likely. Barbara has already mentioned about incentive schemes. They can include monetary and non-monetary rewards, which compensate for teachers in those challenging conditions, and I'll come back to that in a bit. Also, the issue of community engagement to help the teachers and the integration of ICT. I need to be able to, okay. Go to the next slide. So in terms of reducing the teacher gap and enhancing equitable teaching, one of the things that has been done in many African contexts is actually to address teacher professional development in a more holistic manner, including their training, over and above that, their career progression, and also engaging regional collaboration and recognition. This definitely improves teacher motivation and retention in those underserved areas. Secondly, we have what we call systemic reforms. Barbara talked about having a system-wide approach, and this includes having equity prioritizing, for example, teacher deployments to disadvantaged zones, and I'll come back to that with examples in a bit. And then, of course, creating ICT interventions and collaborative tools that can connect those isolated teachers. Also, having strategic integration of skills for the different areas like STEM, digital literacy. This prepares the teachers very well to meet learners' diverse needs. So in terms of reducing the teacher gap, again, just building on what Barbara said, you have to look at it from both sides of the pipeline of teachers, looking at the pre-service, how it is that we need to ensure that we are attracting and selecting future teachers, and then we give them high quality initial teacher education using multiple pathways, and then looking into the policies that are responsible for hiring and deployment, and then providing continuous professional development and leadership in terms of their school leaders. Some of the key approaches I would like to share in the time I have available. This includes improving teacher conditions of service through career and professional development opportunities that are tailor-made to rural contexts, including training teachers in self-directed learning and peer tutoring techniques. We have seen many programs across Africa where they engage in team teaching and what we call cluster-based teacher support or communities of practice or professional learning communities. So that has been a viable way where they support each other in the context which is hard to reach. Number two, ensuring that they have remuneration packages and incentive packages that can be monetary to compensate for their being in a hardship area. We've heard about hardship allowance. Barbara mentioned that earlier. And then strengthening school leadership, not only for management, but for instructional leadership over and above the administrative support, so that they can now mentor the teachers in the classroom and help them to settle in. Also improving the infrastructure. We've seen many programs supported, for example, by the World Bank, where they look at a whole school approach, what they call the school improvement program that includes infrastructure development and also ICT facilities provision, and encouraging communities to support the teachers through volunteer youth to come into the various groups, or what Barbara also mentioned about recruitment initiatives being diversified or being taken to the grassroots level. And I'll give examples from Kenya in a little while. So let me give specific examples, particularly of financial incentives. Barbara mentioned about Gambia's hiring policy, but here I'm talking about their hardship allowance, where they provide 30 to 40% to the primary teachers over and above their salary, those who are in the remote locations, to help them stay. And this has really improved what we call the pupil qualified teacher ratio by 27, which is really good. And it demonstrates the fact that when you provide substantial financial incentives, you can attract and retain teachers in those contexts. When you go to Rwanda, they have what they call performance-based bonuses, averaging 3% of the salary through civil service contracts. And that also has supported the teachers. This didn't work very well in Kenya, but we believe it's something that we can work on. In Burkina Faso, the government actually allocated 4.7 billion US dollars to support the teacher workforce management. When you go to Senegal, just like Gambia, they have also recruited an additional 5,000 teachers in 2021 alone, and focusing on those underserved areas. When you go to Malawi, they have the Teachers Quotas Initiative in rural Malawi, where of course they provide 2-room houses to help teachers. When you think about infrastructure, housing is a big challenge. Coming to Kenya, in 2024 alone, Kenya hired 76,000 teachers. Of these, 46,000 had been interned for a year or more. Barbara spoke about that earlier, about using intern or contract teachers. And then also we had 20,000 new hires and all that. Over and above that, we have had many efforts around school improvement programs in schools, where the schools receive support from World Bank to develop school leadership and also student leadership as well. Over and above that, we have recognition of teachers. One of the more recent ones that we are proud of as Kenya, for example, was a lady called Jeb Koskei, who received the AU Award, Teacher Prize for AU, for being a good teacher in maths and physics during the coronavirus period. In conclusion, I believe African governments, supported by, of course, regional and international partners, are piloting comprehensive reforms and innovative policies that are centered around improving teacher conditions, especially in those hard-to-reach areas. Some of the policies are related to what I've mentioned earlier, the deployment of teachers, hiring at source, and also prioritizing staffing the hard-to-reach areas. These efforts, of course, contribute to increased retention. They address both extrinsic factors, including pay and infrastructure, but also intrinsic factors, including professional growth and having a community of practice to work with. This is, of course, vital to reducing the teacher gap and ensuring there's continuous professional development. So in a nutshell, the teachers we need for the education we want teachers who are collaborative, who are willing to be innovative and creative, who are also globally oriented. I'm just giving a few examples. Teachers who also are culturally responsive, teachers who engage in inclusive practices. And this is done from a systemic perspective, beginning with improvements and change in policies at the ministry and all the way to the classroom level. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Ellen. Thanks a lot for walking us through all of those very concrete examples in Africa, including Kenya, your home country. You know it very well, providing support to the Ministry of Education in this domain of teacher management and development. So thanks, Ellen. And now we are going to move to a different continent with Gregory, who is going to talk to us about Latin America, again referring to some traditional ways to attract teachers to the professions and to retain them in the profession, but also sharing with us some new solutions, including making use of AI in the context of few Latin American countries. So over to you, Gregory.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I forgot to unclick my volume. Can you see everything okay, Muriel?
Yes, perfect. You can move on.
Thank you so much, Muriel, for the invitation to be, and Martin and colleagues at IAP for the invitation to be on this very distinguished panel on such a critical topic on the Global South. And I'm really happy to be able to share some of our work at IDB on strategies to reduce teacher shortage that we've tried in Latin America. So just 2 seconds. In the region, for those of you not familiar with Latin America, we've had significant enrollment gains, but quality continues to lag significantly behind the OECD. There are also persistent learning inequalities, both between and within countries. And evidence, a growing body of robust evidence shows that closing the learning gaps is possible, and it relies on having a good teacher. So there are 4 challenges that stand in the way for ensuring that every child in Latin America has a good teacher. The first is teacher shortage, the prestige of the teaching profession, inequalities in the distribution of teachers, and teacher turnover. So I'm just going to quickly show you one data point for each. We've already seen this. So I want to say the shortage in the region is most acute in specific subject areas. And Barbara mentioned this. And this is just data from Chile, but this is consistent across other countries. In Chile, for example, 93% of high school students have had at least one STEM teacher that was not trained in the subject they are teaching, compared to only 17% of students in Spanish with Spanish or history teachers. And you can see there are stark differences across the subject. Almost 70% of students have had at least a physics teacher that didn't have any training in physics, 61% in chemistry, 53% in biology, and a third of students have actually had math teachers not trained in math. And there's some difference across grades. There's also some research that we have that shows the impact of having out-of-school teachers. Students are less likely to take college entrance exams, enroll in college, and pursue STEM degrees. This does have medium-term impacts for students. Second, the low prestige of the profession. In the region, the teaching profession really struggles to attract the best high school teachers. You can see here, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil, it's very consistent. The lowest scoring on the college entrance exams students are those who major in education across the countries. And you can see this compared to other majors, psychology, nursing, journalism. Education is consistently at the bottom. Next, the inequalities in the distribution of teachers. This is just data from Peru. If you look at the red dots, those are schools during the application process that actually had, those are vacancies that had applicants. The yellows are vacancies that had no applicants. So in the cities, most vacancies have at least one applicant. And in fact, a third of the vacancies have over 10 applicants. But if you look in the rural areas, for example, in Loreto, which is the Amazon region, 83% of vacancies had 0 applicants. This gives you a sense of the kind of inequities in applications. And finally, teachers assigned to challenging and disadvantaged schools rarely stay. In Brazil, about 30% of teachers ask for transfers out of schools in urban slums and favelas every year. And in Chile, almost a third of teachers leave the profession after 1 or 2 years of teaching. And this is mainly because they're assigned to disadvantaged, very difficult to work contexts. So how to address the teacher shortage? We've looked at 2 approaches: increasing recruitment, attracting more and better candidates into teaching, and increasing retention. So I'm going to look really quickly at some different strategies. The first strategies are resources, money. Graciela Perez from IAP has a really nice study that looks at the impact of Beca Vocación Docente, which is a scholarship program to attract higher performing high school teachers into teaching. She found that this program increases recruitment and retainment, but it also strains budgets. It costs about almost $38,000 per new high performing teacher. Monetary incentives, which we've heard in the previous 2 presentations, they're also effective at attracting teachers to hard to staff schools. And retaining teachers at these schools. However, they're also very expensive. School systems, these are just 3 studies that we've conducted at IDB, spend between 16 and 30% over the base salary for these monetary incentives. They have a large impact, but they're also quite expensive. Another strategy that we've explored are nudges, behavioral nudges, using information provision or nudges, which are very low cost and less expensive, but they have a more moderate impact than the monetary incentives. You can see this here in Peru. We conducted some large-scale experiments, and we found that they cost about $13 to fill a hard-to-staff vacancy in Ecuador, we did a zero cost experiment that even had a larger impact, but the impacts are more modest. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about mentorship programs and mentoring. So we've looked at two programs at IDB. One program is called Quiero Ser Profe with the NGO Elige Educar, Chilean NGO. This program, basically what it does to do is tries to increase enrollments and the quality of applicants into teaching majors. High school students are paired with mentors, and they try to motivate these students into the teaching profession. This program has been around since 2010. We've conducted causal research and evaluations of this program, and finds that this program is impactful at getting students to apply to education majors, but it's very hard to scale. It reaches less than 10% of interested students, and it's due to limited availability of the mentors and the high costs of the mentors. And another program in Chile, which is quite interesting, is a mentoring program for novice teachers. Similarly, it pairs a novice teachers in the first or second year with trained mentors who provide guidance throughout the school year. There's some descriptive evidence that this program is effective, but it's also hard to scale for the same reasons. It reaches less than 1% of the novice teachers. So I wanted to quickly mention, and Muriel asked me to give me a minute to discuss these. We have two tools that we've developed with. The first is with Elige Educar, and the other is with the Ministry of Education of Chile, on how can we use AI to increase the scale and impact and make sure that the programs maintain the impact. So Kai we conducted a large-scale experiment with this with 43,000 students. So we were able to basically what we do is we develop the chatbot with the content bank of the tutors, of the human tutors. So they basically have the same information, the same contents, and we were able to roll it out to all of the students. So it was a low-cost way of scaling up this program. So it was very effective at scaling. Just to share some preliminary results, when we compare the human mentors to the AI bot mentor, we find that the high school students were more likely to engage with the AI mentor than the human mentors. We also found that the way they interacted with the mentors were different. For example, they asked more factual, concrete questions to the AI mentors. The human mentors received more personal, emotional queries. So, for example, a student may ask the AI mentor, "Tell me the ranking of the best universities in my region." And they may ask the human mentor, "Well, what was your experience like being a teacher? Did you like it? Was it hard? Did you like majoring in teaching?" So it was more emotional. And they would also share their anxieties and other emotional things with the human tutors, but with the AI tutors, they engaged more, but their interactions were shorter. So we're going to be analyzing the outcomes of the impact of this program, like major choice, preference ranking, major assignment. And to finish, I just want to mention that was a large-scale application. This is a smaller pilot that we have right now with Profe Gabi, which is the AI-powered mentor that we designed with the Ministry of Education to mimic the human mentors as close as possible. Obviously, it's not the same, but with all of the same information, trained on all of the content banks. We worked with the mentors to train these bots. And in the pilot, we found that teachers engaged at the beginning, but there was a sharp drop off after initial weeks. So something that we're looking at, how do we improve user engagement? And it was primarily used by the teachers. They used the mentor, but mainly for lesson planning and support, a little bit for career planning, and much less for social emotional support. So the bot is designed to help them with pedagogical, career planning, and social emotional. They didn't use it as much for the social emotional. However, we plan to scale up this bot with the Ministry of Education in 2026 with all of the novice teachers, between 10 and 12,000 teachers. So I know I'm out of time, but just to end, traditional incentives work, but are costly. Nudges are cheap, but have a modest impact. Human mentoring can be very effective. to attract teachers into the profession and to help retain novice teachers, but it's hard to scale. So as we shared some of our experiences with using new technologies and AI may help scale some of these effective programs. So I'll end there. Thank you. Sorry for going over a minute or two, Muriel.
Yes, thank you so much, Gregory. And I'm sure that many of you will be interested by these particular innovative use of new technologies to support teachers, use of nudges, mentoring programs, AI-powered chatbots, and we may come back to this in the discussion. So thanks a lot, Gregory. Now we are going yet to go to another region, which is the one of Asia, with two presentations, one from India and one from Thailand. And Dia first from India, from the Language and Learning Foundation, is going to present us some specific measures, not only related to teacher allocation and management, but also related to teacher development and teacher training, based on the very ground experience of your foundation, Dia. So over to you.
Thank you, Muriel. Happy to be here at this strategic debate. And I will share my experience based on the work that Language and Learning Foundation does with several governments in India, and focus on how to support teachers to promote equity in learning at scale. We work with national and state governments to improve children's foundation learning at scale. And we are very focused on working with the system, as well as ensuring that we promote equity in learning. That's the centerpiece that we have, and ensuring that those children who are learning the least, they can make significant learning gains. The backdrop for this, this doesn't seem to move. Okay. I'm sorry, should I stop sharing?
Maybe
you
we
can touch on the screen. You will see our next button. That's what I used.
Okay. I don't see that. Yeah, right. And I'm going to talk about three things. The first, of course, a foundation learning mission in India, and what are the learning from there? And then what are the challenges in promoting learning equity at scale, and how teacher professional development, if done well, is a good way forward. So just as a backdrop, in India, there is a foundation literacy and numeracy mission, which is nationwide for the last 4 years, backed by a national policy. And what we are seeing right now is that the strong salience for an FLN program with a clear definition of learning goals and a system-wide approach with some additional budget allocations is showing results, early results in improving student learning. However, there are significant disparities across regions, across schools, and within a classroom. So that's a big challenge for us. I'm going to list 4 of these challenges that through our work with the governments we have identified. There are many more, of course. One is where children remain away from school because of seasonal migration or festivals or work at home. Schools are not able to cater to the learning needs of children who are learning the least. So that's another challenge, to be able to work with children who need some remediation. The mismatch between children's familiar or home languages and the language of instruction at school, that's fairly widespread in India. And of course, instructional practices that do not engage all children. So these are some challenges that we are facing in our effort to improve learning at scale for all children. I'll just pick up one of them. This mismatch between children's most familiar languages and the language that is used for instruction at school, we've seen that a bilingual or a multilingual education program is a very impactful intervention. And through several demonstration programs, through working with state governments, we've seen that working with teachers and preparing them through pre-service education as well as in-service teacher education to on strategies of bilingual and multilingual teaching. How do you teach unfamiliar languages? And also addressing some attitudes about inclusion of local languages and cultures in formal teaching and learning that teachers may themselves have. But as some of the earlier speakers mentioned, there are challenges around the availability of teachers who know the children's local languages. In fact, in this centralized process of recruitment, there are pockets where there are no teachers who are recruited on an annual basis or whenever recruitment happens, who come from a language background which children understand. And that's a big issue in many cases. They're not enough qualified teachers. They don't pass through the competitive teacher recruitment examination. And then there are challenges about deployment as well. So while multilingual education offers a very impactful way of supporting schools and children where there's a mismatch of languages, but there is often a challenge of teacher availability, and then of course of working on high quality bilingual or multilingual instruction programs. I'll now focus, because we've all said that teachers are central to all change that can happen in education. The challenges that we face in India, and probably common across in many countries with teacher professional development programs, there's just too much content that is loaded on to a teacher training of a few days that may happen face-to-face, and equity is often not the focus. These programs are often uniform, maybe nationwide, in our case, often statewide, and many issues that are more relevant in particular contexts do not get included. Now, a cascade training program in India starts with, let's say, at the state level, 30, 40 state level master trainers, and goes on to orientation of about 800 or so trainers at the district level or regional level, and then training of teachers. For example, in a state, there could be 90,000 or 100,000 teachers or even more. So it's a cascade model, and often the trainers themselves are drawn from a background which is not in primary teaching. So they're not equipped to be actually addressing the challenges that teachers face. The work that we have done and done with state governments is on the right-hand side. For example, trying to limit the focus of teacher training, the annual teacher training program, on some priority practices rather than packing in too much content, which are very focused on how teaching can change in the classroom and which are directly connected with children's learning. Bringing in contextual elements, for example, a bilingual instruction program, also how are multi-level classrooms to be addressed, multi-grade teaching to be addressed. In India, it's very common for a teacher to be teaching 2 or 3 grades. So how do you tweak those uniform state-level programs to address these needs? We've tried out a 60-20-20 model where 60% of the time is on demonstration and practice, learning by doing by teachers themselves, 20% with social and collaborative learning, and only 20% on a formal input or knowledge building. And that seems to be very useful, because then teachers get to practice during the training program itself. And then, of course, ensuring that most master trainers have primary teaching experience. So this seems to be working at scale, some of these changes that we brought about. The other thing I want to highlight again for professional development is that the face-to-face training 3 or 4 days in a year is expensive, can be done maybe once or twice a year. But it is important that the professional development of teachers is continuous. So what we've managed to do along with the government in several states is to add on these other components. So the teacher mentors and supervisors who visit schools regularly, they are able to provide very clear, actionable feedback on classroom practices. So that adds to inputs that teachers receive. monthly meetings where teachers come together, which have been largely administrative in their agenda, how can there be more discussion around teaching practices with a structured agenda, with very clear handouts, videos, etc. Weekly WhatsApp nudges that can go out to teachers about micro-teaching practices on very clear themes that they can easily see and implement. Also, short courses, online as well as blended courses on platforms that are available at scale around foundational literacy and numeracy, multilingual education. These could be courses which are 1-hour courses or 5 hours or even shorter courses that then teachers could choose from. And then promoting some professional learning communities of teachers around specific themes. So trying to dovetail and string together an annual calendar of teacher professional development that builds on the face-to-face training, but includes a variety of these inputs. So that is something that is showing some good results, more in terms of teachers' perceptions of how they see this as better than what was happening earlier. We still don't have a research or evaluation around this. I will end by emphasizing the role of the mid-tier. The mid-tier academic support and administrative officials, they can play a really strong role in guiding and supporting teachers for improving practices around equitable learning. But very often they're bogged down with a lot of administrative work, data collection and reporting responsibilities, often kind of serve as post offices for messages from the top to the bottom and then collecting data from the bottom to be sent off to the state level. They often lack the capacity because there's not been enough investment in their professional development so that they are able to then guide teachers. So our work with the mid-tier in India is in two dimensions. One, to try and redefine their roles where instructional support, improving classroom practices becomes center stage. And of course, apart from all the other administrative work they're doing, but this becomes an important part of their work. And then, of course, continuous professional development for them, and also differentiated programs for their capacity building on how they can support teachers better in foundational learning. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, dear. Thanks a lot. It was very interesting, especially to hear from you about the importance of not considering only uniform measures, but also take into account very important dimensions as bilingual or multilingual teaching, local cultures, and all of this. And you've touched also upon on the use of new technologies and nudges also in your context, echoing what we've just heard from Gregory, and also the role of the middle tier. And Barbara certainly will want to get back also to this in the more general discussion. But before we get to this point, we are going to hear now from Dr. Cryos, who is going to explain to us the role of the Equitable Education Fund in the context of Thailand. And that's a very specific structure that has been established by the government of Thailand to provide support, especially to teachers. And so over to you, Cryos.
Thank you so much for having me and our organization. We are still quite a young organization, only 7 years old. We locate in the Prime Minister offices and work across the ministry that enable us to work with multiple partners apart from the Ministry of Education to reduce education inequality. We are not only develop a research program, but we have a fund attached to our organization so we can invest in some programs that we can then propose the nationwide policy at the later stage, which is about one of the programs that we're gonna explain today about homegrown teacher. And if you know any organization in your area that also equity focused, we are trying to build this kind of network of equity focused organization to we call Equitable Education Alliance. So that's just a brief idea about EEF. The population we are going to focus in reducing teacher gaps in the remote area in Thailand is about the at risk of dropping out population, which based on the UNESCO framework of 7 dimensions of exclusion is dimension 4 to dimension 5. Although in Thailand we have a free education policy across the country, but if you have free education but you don't have teacher at the school, then free education doesn't mean you have a high quality, equitable quality education for all. So this is a population group we are going to focus on this discussion. And based on the recent PISA score in 2022, if you break the population group into income level in 4 quartile, you can see that if you looking to the upper quantile, the population who live in the better living standard, better income level, tend to perform better in. There will be more student that achieve level 4 or above. But if you look at the bottom 25% of the income, there won't be any level 5 or 6 in PISA score, and mostly they are 77% less than level 1. So this is the gap of education quality or learning outcome among the population group in Thailand based on the recent PISA results. What is the root cause behind this? We suspect that the different quality or the gap inequality between school in Thailand. We have about 28,000 schools across the country. About 1,183 of them are what we call protected school or a small school who are located in the remote area, like in the island, in the north, the hilltop, or very far away from the urban area. In this kind of school, they always perform lowest in any kind of assessment, either PISA or our own standardized test in Thailand. They are educated about nearly 100,000 most vulnerable children in Thailand. If you look at the number of poverty among the students, they are about double on the national average in terms of the number of families who earn less than 100 baht per day or below absolute poverty line of the World Bank. And more importantly, in this kind of school, they have less than one teacher per classroom, which is the very serious problem when we talked about teacher shortage. And as I mentioned, that they mostly are the school in the highland and the at-risk or borderline area of Thailand, and in a number of dimension, they have a language barrier. They need a multilingual education. They need a better access to infrastructure or resources, and also they always have a high teacher turnover rate, just like in many countries. Most of teacher, when they start working, they have about 2 years that they can file for moving out from that school, and most of them gonna move out after the 2 years limitation. So when we address this kind of problem, we develop this program called Homegrown Teacher, which is not about EEF alone. We work with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Higher Education, and also related agencies. This is one of the key takeaway from my presentation, is that what we are trying to do here is that we want to sustainably reduce a high teacher turnover in a small protected school in Thailand, about 1,000 of them, 1,000 to 1,500 schools across Thailand. By doing so, we also try to catalyze a scalable closed system teacher development reform. In Thailand, there was only about 10% or even less in some year of a closed system teacher development. They are mostly open system. So we want to propose the policy recommendation that we need a closed loop or closed system teacher production target specifically for this kind of school in the next 10 or 20 years to make sure we fulfill the teacher in this sustainably fulfill the teacher here in this school. We want to try the different way on this approach to introduce the concept homegrown teacher by recruiting the students who are living under poverty and want to become teacher in their neighborhood to to train as a teacher. By doing so, we try to achieve another critical goal of EEF is to eradicate the intergenerational poverty in this most deprived area in Thailand. So if we can give the scholarship to these students and they are living there since their birth, and when they come back to become a teacher in their neighborhood, that's the best sustainable solution that we could do. And we want to promote the school and community engagement because as long as they are their own children who come back and become teacher in their community, they will maximize the opportunity for mobilized engagement from their own community. They speak their own language, they know their own history. So this is the better way to make sure that school is not only just receive additional teacher, school will receive a different way of engagement from the community. And we want to also develop an innovative financing model. If we can start this program at some point, we would like to introduce the opportunity for the private sector for the donation by providing their tax incentive or develop some kind of social impact bonds to finance this program innovatively in case that we can do in the future. And this is just to give you the rough idea about Thailand as a country. On the right-hand side of our map, the dot is the school that we recruit students from the poor family from this neighborhood, and they need to go back to teach in that dot in each of the community. You can see they are mostly in the border between Thailand and Myanmar, and also in the Iceland across Thailand. And another unique feature in this program is that we only allow university or teacher training institute that locate close to the school. We're not allowed university in Bangkok to train teachers who will be working in Chiang Mai or in Phuket because that's too far away. We need to have a close system of supporting, and we require that any university who gonna receive a scholarship from us must support in-service training for the next 6 years. After 4 years of pre-service training, they need to work another 6 years. So in total, is 10 years program for any individual teacher trained by their institution. So this is a new way that we try to make sure that any university who want to apply to this kind of program, they commit for the long-term reform of the community within their region. And most of these children, their family earn less than $2 per day. When they become teacher, they instantly in one generation leave the poverty trap by becoming a teacher. We have done this program for in the past 5 years. So we provide about 1,500 scholarship already. We're going to continue it in the second phase in the next 5 years. Focus primarily on the primary school with special education, and also non-formal education institution in the future. We not only develop this kind of MLE enable training for them. We also introduce them the dialogic teaching and also active learning program from a number of our partners to make sure that these students are well equipped with the future ready challenge in their classroom. And this is just to give you an idea. On the left-hand side is the student who we recruit, and then the student who come back and fix their house, family house, based using their salary to make sure that it's not only we save one children, but we save the whole family through this program. And this is just a testimony from each of the student. I will share this slide for you to read on. So this is my last slide. So the key takeaway from this program is that we need, at the planning process, we need to be able to forecast in the future that how many teachers we need in this small protected school in the next 10 years. And we lock in that kind of quota and produce the new teacher through this closed system production with the university who commit with us in the next 10 years. This is the new way of planning and also the new way of intervene in this kind of program to make sure that we solve this teacher high turnover problem once and for all. And we need to identify common educational themes in each pockets of community and area in Thailand. They have a different culture, different context in the south, in the north, in the northeast. We need to identify common educational theme together between university and the communities. And we need to make sure that these training institution have a long-term commitment and engagement with the community in the remote area. The curriculum they develop, the additional curriculum they develop must be connected with the communities. And the fourth part is that we emphasize on the authentic learning. This closed system process allow us to do things more focused, not just we produce teacher who we don't know where they're gonna work. When we know exactly where they're gonna work, we can do this summer program where they can go back and start intern or teaching in the school. They're gonna go work in the future, and they come back with a better idea. They know exactly what they need to do in the next 2 or 3 year, final year of their training. And the local university and local school should have a long-term collaboration in this program. They have some kind of sense of responsibility, and the community leader and the university leader can be able to work together. It's not just to train a teacher, but it's the opportunity for the university to empower and change the whole community in one program. This is something that we try to advocate to the university. And if you want to know more about this program, you can connect with us via website, Facebook, and YouTube at EEF. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks a lot, Krayos, and we will circulate after this session the number of links to the websites of the different organizations that were represented in this panel. So thanks a lot to all of our speakers, and Krayos also to mention especially this interesting concept of protected schools in the concept of planning, and so the role of different types of stakeholders than what we've heard from the previous speakers, including the private sector and also local universities, which is, I think, a very interesting insight. So I think from the different presentation that we've heard, well, it's clear that it's difficult only to envisage some standardized measures to try to address the issue of the teacher gap and more efficient teacher management and support. And so maybe my first question to our panelists would be, from your experience, how contextualized, context-specific measures to support teacher recruitment and training can be envisaged, including in large countries, as we've started to hear about in India, in order to better address local needs. So I don't know, maybe, Dear, if you want maybe to start on this one.
Sure. So I'll share one example for recruitment and one for training. In recruitment, as I mentioned, that there is a mismatch between pockets where teachers do not know the children's languages. There are not enough teachers. So 2 states have started to fix language quotas in their recruitment. And these teachers are then being recruited from outside the central recruitment examination, so that there is a fixed number of teachers who are required based on the language situations, and these positions are recruited from outside of that central exam. On training, while the state government makes a training module that is uniform for, say, 100,000 teachers, and most of the time for foundation learning, this module assumes that teachers teach only one grade. They're going to spend 90 minutes for a language class in a grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3, but that's not the real situation. So what we try and do, again, working with state governments, is to have simple handouts or lesson plans, of how teachers can practically work with 2 grades or sometimes even 3 grades, and ensure that children have a high time on task. Also varied language situations. Often you can't provide solutions for all language situations, but at the minimum, for example, how do you enhance the oral language time that children get for a familiar language, as well as how is there explicit teaching of an unfamiliar language, exposure to simple input of the unfamiliar language? So trying to say, even if we can't change the lessons, the reading and writing part, in the oral language, how do you work with both languages together? That tweak is possible, and we've tried to contextualize that at locations where there's a need.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, dear. I don't know if someone else from you wants to react on this idea of contextualization of the measures to be taken. There is one of the person from our audience, Bright, who said, how do we balance the linkage of teacher training to rural realities while most education systems remain obsessed with standardized examination? I don't know, maybe Hélène, in the context of some African countries you are familiar with, do you want to react also?
Yes, I would like to start by saying that context does matter. And I'll give an example from Kenya where the hiring policy has been to decentralize that to the local level so that then the local communities are hiring someone from their own who then they feel the need that is there. Secondly, in terms of the Teacher Service Commission, they have been deploying to those hard to reach areas. I know there was a comment on the page that says, if you deploy the people and they don't report, then what happens? I believe that that is where now AI will come in to help in the absence of teachers who actually get hired to go there. But number three, in terms of the training, there has been prioritization to the areas that are most in need. We have organizations which are prioritizing, for example, a refugee context and the host communities so that they can provide tailor-made programs for those contexts. So really addressing unique contexts based upon their own needs and helping them in terms of enhancing the capacity of teachers, but also ensuring that they receive additional support from the Ministry of Education through what we call curriculum support officers, as well as the professional learning communities they are finding themselves in. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I don't know, Gregory, if you want to add something on this idea of tailor-made measures and contextualization of measures.
Sure. I wanted to say a few things. I think there's some things that countries that can do are related to just information. So regarding recruitment, often teachers or often high school students don't have good information about the teacher career path. There's often, myths about the salaries. In some countries, the salaries are much higher than students think they are, or they don't really have information about the teacher career path or about opportunities for training, advancement, different types of benefits. So I think one thing that governments can make more of an effort, and I think that was a little bit what we're seeing with the program Quiero Ser Profe in Chile, is just targeting more information so at least students can make an informed decision and understand the teaching career a little bit better, especially in countries that have had recent reforms. And maybe, and we realized, for example, Chile, they increased the salaries drastically, but still people didn't have this information and they still thought teaching was a very low paid profession. And in the case of Chile, I mean, there's still progress they could make, but they had made significant changes. Also regarding assignment, similar. One thing that we realized in Peru, for example, often Peru has very significant monetary incentives for teachers to work in rural schools. They can make up to 20, 30% over the base salary. We realized in many focus groups that teachers often weren't informed about. They didn't know which schools offered the incentives. So, I mean, governments also can make an effort to help teachers make better choices so they understand what are the benefits that they can, or the bonuses or career path benefits. In some countries, you advance quicker along the career path if you work at a rural school, and just monetary incentives. And finally, often monetary incentives are not enough, and recruitment at the national level is not enough. you really do need to think about local recruitment and training. In some areas, even if you have, like in Peru, you have significant monetary incentives, it's still very hard to get teachers to come and work in a different region. Teachers often want to work close to their homes, and there's lots of, especially female teachers, there's lots of evidence of this. So it's important to think about, and Brazil has done some of this with policies to set up teacher training places in very remote areas, or maybe make more online training available to teachers in these areas. And often, and there's some examples of this in Colombia, for example, you may need to adjust, and I think Barbara mentioned this in her presentation, some of the standards. You may simply not be able, especially if you have high standards, you may not be able to attract some teachers to certain areas, disadvantaged areas. So in the case of Colombia, for example, in the post-conflict areas, it was very difficult to attract teachers. So they had to establish training and lower the standards to be able to hire enough teachers. And then the government then what they need to do is invest and ensure that they can target training to make sure these teachers have the tools to be effective. But you can't necessarily have the same standards, or you're simply not going to get tenured teachers. You're going to have to use contract teachers in these areas. So I think there's different things that the governments can do that are really not high cost either.
Thanks a lot, Gregory. And maybe this leads us to the role of the middle tier, which is the favorite subject of our colleague Barbara. But it's true that talking about localization and contextualization of measures, then maybe the role of the middle tier needs to be taken into account. So maybe both Barbara and Krajos also, when you talked about this homegrown teacher scholarship program, I don't know how much this was handled at central level or in this case by local authorities. So maybe, Barbara, do you want to react on the role of the middle tier in this context?
Yeah, very briefly. I was music to my ears listening to what Dia was saying about the role of the middle tier. These intermediate roles in the education systems have been neglected in terms of the support that they can provide to teachers. And it's really, really important that teachers can turn to someone above the school in order for them to feel less isolated, because sometimes teachers can feel quite isolated, especially if they're in remote areas and they're single teacher schools. It's really important to get a dynamic going. And so the middle tier is that place to go. But often, as Dia was saying, they have a tendency to do compliance monitoring, ticking boxes. So it's really important that we invest in that level to get that mindset shift happening, so that they move away from compliance monitoring towards instructional leadership. And there's simple ways that they can do that. They can organize peer learning communities between teachers, between head teachers, to get them together to look at the problems that they're facing and to together find answers that are locally relevant. And also they can, like what STIR is doing in India, they have like learning improvement cycles where they have a questionnaire, they send it to the teachers, what are the issues that you're facing at the moment? And then they organize a specific session on a topic that was identified by the teachers. And that is a much better way of professional development, because it's job embedded and it's not something that happens once in a while, like those 3 days that was mentioned that are costly. So this is important in terms of teachers feeling that they're being consulted and that their questions are being answered. And another reason why it's so important to capacitate that level is also because they need to be better able to use the data that they have at their disposal in order to put in place some learning improvement strategies. So, for example, they can pair low-performing schools with high-performing schools that has been shown to work well, or they can, like looking at the data, identify the schools that need the most help. But unfortunately, again, that is not often done where the capacity is low. And then one point that I want to make that is not related, but in the slides that Gregory was showing, with the maps where you could see that some schools, teachers just did not apply. that's really insightful, and shows that one thing that governments really need to be investing in, if they don't already have it, are those teacher management information systems or allocation systems that use an algorithm, and so teachers can only apply to the schools where there is an undersupply. So all the schools that have oversupply, teachers can apply to. And then, gradually they'll start also applying to those where, no one wants to apply. And then if really no one wants to apply, then you can also find alternative solutions. And the algorithm can also take into consideration the language of instruction, for example. So there's many things in terms of improving the system that need to be put in place by governments.
Thanks, Barbara. Krajos, do you want to comment on this?
It's mostly a grassroots initiative on the national level or central level. The Ministry of Education has been trying so hard in the past decades to fill the teacher in these remote area school without much of a success. I think what we ask for at the central level is for them to tell us that how many teacher seats will be vacant in which school in the next 10 years. We find it quite difficult, just like catching the bullets, because teacher always move with certain and as many reasons as possible to project and to confirm the next 10 years that we will have this seat available. That seat available is quite difficult for them, but they have done the best estimate for us. And then we propose this number out there and request for the proposal from university who have a teacher school. They can apply to us. We will use a competitive and peer review processes to make sure that we get the best proposal from the university, that they will produce how many teachers from for this community, and then we have 6 years of continuous support to the school. The university who make the best proposal gets the scholarship pools to them, and also enrichment program to the university as well. So they are getting both two types of grants to the university, and it's their own area, it's their own community. So this is a grassroots initiative, mostly in the homegrown teacher program. And we will have an evaluation coming soon, because the first batch of teachers just start teaching at the school level last year, and we will follow up with the evaluation, and we can report to the international community at a later stage. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And then maybe we're going to end with the last topic, because we're running out of time, but which is the important one that is across several of your presentation, especially the one from Gregory, from Dear, and from Hélène, regarding the use of new technologies and digital tools to support these whole discussions about teachers. And so how you see the role of technology for addressing equity issues as regard teaching and learning in rural areas. And there is one of our participants, Edwin, that is referring to the case of Kenya, where there have been a number of efforts, such as offering incentives, conducting large-scale recruitment. But however, many teachers who are employed never report to the schools. And this raised the question, should we introduce artificial intelligence in a unique and creative way to deliver education in these highly marginalized areas? It may be time to rethink the reliance on physical teachers in such context. And so how would you respond to Edwin? So maybe starting with you, Hélène.
Thank you, Edwin, for that question. I touched on it earlier in my submission, but I would like to say that, yes, really, we will not bury our heads in the sand and not embrace technology. And we've just had good feedback from Gregory about what is happening in Latin America. And so it's an area that we can really learn on the chatbots, also what is happening in India. But in Kenya, one of the things we've done is we have piloted a program on live streaming, where we have like satellite schools being paired to one school, for example, in an urban area. And that way, then you are able to transcend the idea of maybe conflict or insecurity, to be able to share teachers across different regions. So that is one area. Live streaming is a possibility. The very traditional one is use of radio programs. The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, for example, in Kenya, does very well with those school programs. If they are well coordinated, they send out timetables and calendars to the schools. They can mediate that gap in the meantime. And the most important thing that I mentioned earlier is where we rely on the professional learning communities. Over and above AI, really, you wouldn't substantiate the place of the teacher supporting each other at the school level. So for us, the challenge would be, or not all schools are connected to the electricity grid. If they want, then technology becomes easier. But in the meantime, live streaming and then also relying on the peer-to-peer support within school would go a long way. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hélène. Dear Gregory, do you want to have a last word on this one?
Sure.
Okay,
I think so. Most of the work that we've done at the IDB has been on using AI to strengthen teacher programs. So I do think AI has a big potential to scale up some of these human-intensive programs that are very difficult to scale. And there's lots of research on like coaching programs and mentoring programs that they have kind of like what's it called, a voltage drop. As you scale up the programs, it's very hard to maintain quality. And they're very expensive to scale up. There are very few economies of scale. So I think AI holds a lot of promise in scaling up programs. Obviously, it's not going to be the same as a human mentor. So we may want to think about hybrid, where maybe AI bots can provide lots of information and targeted information, and humans can jump in if necessary, thinking about these kinds of options. But I do think that AI holds a lot of potential because and like I mentioned, just the two programs in Chile before we introduced some of this technology, the programs were too expensive and they were only reaching 1 and 10% of potential teachers or high school students. So I think in that case, while of course it's not the exact same yet, I think we'll only get better over time. I think it is an opportunity to strengthen teachers. I have more doubts about it with students. And I guess that's beyond the scope of this conversation. I also want to mention, I think it does hold there's some things that you can do with professional development. One project that we have right now, we're working with the Ministry of Education in Peru. They have a professional development program online. Most of their professional development, like most school systems in Latin America, after COVID went online. And so we're working with them to develop some tools to kind of engage with the teachers, support teachers, provide them feedback while they're taking this online professional development. So I think there's also tools that we could develop. But I really think it holds a lot of for teachers. I think that we can, especially for teachers and particularly for programs that are very difficult to scale.
Thanks a lot, Gregory. Dear, do you want to add something in the context of India?
I think I echo what Gregory said, that our focus also is on enhancing teacher professional development through the use of technology with high quality, as I mentioned, WhatsApp nudges and online blended courses. The second is assessments of children. Some assessments, formative assessments, can be done more quickly. The results can be consolidated by using technology, and then teachers can decide what to do with different groups of students. And the third use that we are trying to, this is in the early stages, is for teachers who are in areas where they do not know the children's languages. How can they, and these are non-dominant languages, there is not large language databases available for that, but how can they pick up vocabulary, conversation, phrases, etc., through a multilingual education app?
Thank you so much, dear. Thank you. Thanks a lot to all of you. Thanks also for our audience. It was a pleasure to have you today. There is a lot of research and evidence behind all of the presentations that were made from IIP, from the Inter-American Development Bank, from the Language Learning Foundations, from our colleagues from the ADEA and so on. So we will be pleased to share with you a number of key references after this session of today. And so we will be in touch related related to that. And to finish with, I wanted to mention that our fourth and last strategic debate for 2025 will take place on the 18th of November, and that it will be dedicated to planning funding approaches to address learning inequalities in a time of change. So hope that you will be again with us for this next strategic debate. Thanks a lot, colleagues, for your participation today, and see you for our next debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Great debate.